BYD's net profit just imploded by 55% in 3 months, a collapse so severe that analysts across the industry went silent trying to explain it. This is the same company that 12 months earlier had done the impossible, outselling Tesla on the global stage, running factories at maximum capacity, shipping vehicles to 6 continents, and earning public acknowledgement from Elon Musk himself, who looked at their latest technology announcement and responded with a single word: impressive. The founder stood in front of cameras and declared his intention to become the largest automaker in human history, not just the biggest EV maker, not just the biggest in China, the biggest car company that has ever existed anywhere on this planet. And then the numbers turned catastrophic. Dealerships started going dark without warning. Over 300,000 vehicles got pulled back in recalls spanning barely a year, and buried inside the financial statements is a government subsidy story that changes the entire narrative. A dependency so deep that Western analysts who bothered to look twice started asking a very different set of questions about what this company actually is underneath the growth headlines. This is BYD, a business that started in 1995 as a $300,000 battery operation in Shenzhen, reverse engineering Japanese cells in a rented factory, building itself component by component into the largest electric vehicle manufacturer on Earth. A company that survived the pandemic, outlasted every single domestic rival in the most vicious automotive price war ever documented, and physically dethroned Tesla on the global sales leaderboard using technology that competitors were studying, fearing, and according to those same competitors, genuinely respecting. But right now, BYD faces a crisis that is structurally different from anything in its 3-decade history. And the strangest element is how quietly the whole thing is unraveling while almost nobody in Western media is paying sustained attention. How does a company that was supposed to dominate the electric future end up fighting simultaneous wars on 5 separate fronts, losing domestic market share, locked out of every major international market through tariffs, bleeding dealers, managing recalls at a scale that suggests systemic manufacturing strain, and relying on state transfers to keep profit figures from looking like a disaster? To understand what happened, you have to rewind to 2024, the absolute zenith of BYD's power, the peak. 2024 belonged to BYD in every measurable way. The company moved 1.76 million pure electric vehicles and 3.4 million total vehicles when you include plug-in hybrids, a 41% jump from the previous year. Total revenue hit $107 billion, net profit reached $5.6 billion, and BYD surpassed Volkswagen to become the best-selling car brand of any kind in China. Not the best-selling EV brand, the best-selling brand period in the largest automotive market on the planet. In total electric vehicle deliveries worldwide, they accomplished something that 2 years earlier had seemed categorically impossible. They beat Tesla. The technology narrative matched the sales momentum perfectly. The Blade battery, BYD's proprietary lithium iron phosphate architecture, developed entirely in-house, had fundamentally shifted the global conversation around EV safety and cost. Traditional battery packs stack cylindrical cells inside modules, then stack those modules inside packs, layer upon layer of structure and weight. The Blade design eliminates the module stage entirely, packing cells directly into the structural housing like blades standing in a box, increasing volumetric efficiency by 50%, cutting manufacturing costs dramatically, and passing the nail penetration test, the most brutal safety benchmark in the battery industry, without thermal runaway or fire. UBS analysts physically disassembled a BYD Seagull in 2023 and concluded that the per-unit manufacturing cost was 35% lower than a comparable Volkswagen product. 35% is not an incremental advantage. It is a structural cost gap that Western automakers have no clear roadmap to close within any timeline that matters commercially. In January 2025, BYD announced that its God's Eye driver assistance package, covering adaptive cruise control, lane centering, automated parking, and highway navigation assist, would ship as standard equipment on every single vehicle in the lineup at every price point with zero additional charge. Features that Mercedes, BMW, and Tesla were selling as premium upgrades for $3,000 to $15,000. BYD made standard on cars priced under $10,000. Elon Musk responded publicly with that single word: impressive. When the CEO of your most prominent global competitor compliments your product announcement, you know exactly where you stand in the competitive hierarchy. On paper, in the sales data, and across the technology benchmarks, everything pointed to a future that had already arrived, and BYD owned it completely. Warren Buffett's original $232 million investment from 2008 had grown to a peak valuation exceeding $8 billion. Wang Chuanfu stood in front of international press and declared that BYD intended to become the largest car company in the world. Full stop. 5 years earlier, that statement would have sounded like ambition from a regional player nobody outside China was watching. In 2024, it sounded like a timeline. Then the cracks started appearing, and they came fast. The price war that looked like strength was actually panic wearing a very convincing mask. In May 2025, BYD announced price cuts reaching up to 34% across 22 different models simultaneously. Some vehicles dropped by the equivalent of $10,000 overnight. From the outside, it looked like the largest EV manufacturer on the planet, flexing its cost advantage, daring every smaller competitor to match prices they couldn't possibly afford. BYD's stock fell 8% the same day the cuts were announced. And investors do not sell when a company is moving from a position of strength. They sell when they understand what the move actually signals. What it signaled was this. BYD had manufactured significantly more vehicles than the market was absorbing. Industry investigators found dealerships across China sitting on more than 3 months of unsold inventory, more than double the healthy standard. Dealer lots were packed so tightly that new shipments from the factory had nowhere to park. The factories kept running because stopping a production line is expensive and because the quarterly delivery numbers needed to maintain the growth narrative. The inventory problem accumulated silently at the dealer level, while the headline figures still looked like expansion. The price war that followed was not a BYD strategy. It was an industry-wide emergency. Researchers calculated that the cumulative price war across Chinese EV manufacturers from 2023 to 2025 destroyed approximately $69 billion in industry revenue. Average vehicle transaction prices across China fell more than 11% in 3 years. Chinese regulators eventually had to formally prohibit automakers from selling cars below manufacturing cost, a rule that had to be written specifically because companies were already doing it, incinerating cash just to keep production moving and prevent lots from overflowing. BYD technically complied with the rule while continuing to discount through rebates, insurance bundles, and trade-in bonuses that produced the exact same economic effect. The domestic competitive landscape had also shifted in ways BYD's internal forecasts had not fully absorbed. Dozens of smaller Chinese EV makers had studied BYD's vertical integration playbook and replicated it on state-subsidized timelines. Government purchase incentives that had fueled the entire EV adoption wave started contracting as fiscal priorities shifted. BYD was not just competing against Tesla and Volkswagen anymore. It was fighting 50 cheaper, hungrier domestic rivals, selling essentially the same value proposition to the same customer at the same aggressive price point. By the first quarter of 2026, the financial results arrived, and they were catastrophic. Net profit collapsed by more than 55% year over year. Revenue fell nearly 12%. BYD's market share inside China, its home market, the foundation of its entire identity, dropped from roughly 33% down to 26% in a single year. And here is the number that almost never appeared in Western financial coverage. In 2025, BYD received over 12 billion yuan in government subsidies. That figure represents nearly 40% of the company's entire net profit for the year, coming directly from state support. Strip that number out, and the profit figure does not merely shrink. It becomes a question that demands a fundamentally different kind of answer. The company that beat Tesla on the global leaderboard was, under closer examination, dependent on government transfers to keep its bottom line looking remotely respectable. If you want to know how a car company is actually performing, ignore the press releases and look at the people selling the cars on the ground. In April 2025, one of BYD's largest dealer networks in China, Shandong Chengqing Holdings, collapsed almost without warning. This was not a marginal operation. Shandong Chengqing ran over 20 dealerships, generated roughly 3 billion yuan in annual revenue, and employed more than 1,200 people. One of its flagship stores had been publicly recognized as the #1 BYD showroom in all of China. Within weeks, more than 20 locations shut down, showrooms went dark, and customers who had prepaid for multi-year service packages, maintenance plans, and insurance bundles were left holding receipts for services that no longer existed. Some employees reportedly went without pay for up to 6 months. BYD and the dealer group blamed each other publicly. The customers holding worthless contracts did not particularly care who was right. It was not an isolated event. Other major dealer networks hit identical walls. Investigators examining the pattern found evidence of channel stuffing. BYD pushing dealerships to accept inventory volumes far beyond what local demand could absorb, sustaining the company's headline delivery figures while quietly transferring financial risk onto dealer balance sheets that had agreed to take the cars first and figure out the selling later. The pressure did not stop at the dealer level. Leaked internal communications from late 2024 showed BYD demanding that parts suppliers cut their prices by another 10% for 2025, on top of margins already compressed through previous rounds of cost pressure. Suppliers who had built their entire business around BYD's growth trajectory found themselves with two options: cut deeper or lose the account. Then came the balance sheet analysis. GMT Research, the firm that helped expose the financial structure behind the Evergrande collapse, published findings on BYD's real debt position. Their methodology placed BYD's adjusted debt, accounting for extended supplier payment terms and obligations not captured in standard accounting, at approximately 323 billion yuan. The number on the official balance sheet was roughly 30 billion. BYD disputed the methodology. GMT Research stood by it. The market heard both sides and drew its own conclusions from a stock chart that had already been moving in one direction. Starting in late 2024, BYD found itself managing a recall schedule that started attracting attention well beyond Chinese automotive media. September 2024, nearly 97,000 Dolphin and Yuan Plus EVs recalled over a steering system defect carrying documented fire risk. January 2025, another 7,000 SUVs from BYD's upscale Yangwang brand pulled back for the same reason: fire risk. October 2025, over 115,000 vehicles, Tang SUVs and Yuan Pro EVs recalled for a drive motor controller that could destroy its own circuit board, and for battery pack sealing so inadequate that water intrusion was documented under normal road conditions. November 2025, nearly 89,000 Chin Plus hybrid vehicles recalled for a battery defect that could cause sudden total power loss while driving. More than 300,000 vehicles recalled in barely over a year. Not a single systemic issue caught early and addressed cleanly, but a pattern across multiple platforms, multiple drivetrains, multiple model years, the kind of pattern that suggests quality control processes under strain across a manufacturing system that was asked to scale faster than it could reliably manage. Owner documentation emerged alongside the official recalls. Videos circulated showing door panels and interior trim on vehicles priced above $40,000 that flexed visibly under hand pressure. An independent examination of a crash beam on one model found structural metal thin enough to bend manually on a component that exists specifically to absorb impact energy during collision. A 2-year-old Chin Plus was documented with visible rust on exterior body panels on a car sold by a company that had spent years positioning itself as technologically ahead of every legacy competitor. Then in April 2026, a fire broke out at BYD's own facility in Shenzhen, a parking structure filled with black smoke, and the footage spread immediately across social media. After 300,000 recalls in 12 months, the public interpretation was instantaneous. Investigators later confirmed it was not a battery fire. A contractor had accidentally ignited insulation material in a storage area containing scrapped vehicles. No injuries, no new defect revealed. The Blade battery genuinely tests well for safety across every independent benchmark. But trust, once spent, does not restore itself on the basis of a technical clarification. The benefit of the doubt was already gone. And this is where the crisis becomes something BYD has genuinely never faced before, because the path forward does not clearly exist in any of the places the company needs it to be. The United States applies a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles, not a nuanced selective trade measure. 100%. A $30,000 BYD product becomes a $60,000 product before import administration, dealer margin, or domestic logistics. BYD is not losing American market share. It was structurally excluded from the American market before the current crisis even began. The largest new car market in the world is not commercially available to BYD at current tariff levels, full stop. So BYD pursued growth everywhere else. Europe, Brazil, Thailand, Indonesia, Turkey, Uzbekistan, factories under construction in Hungary to manufacture inside EU borders and sidestep the EU tariff structure, and an overseas delivery target raised in 2026 from 1.3 million to 1.5 million vehicles, despite the domestic collapse. The global expansion was supposed to be the pressure release valve when the home market became too competitive to sustain margins. It is not working on the timeline BYD needs. The EU imposed additional duties of 17.4% on Chinese EVs on top of existing tariff structures, citing state subsidies as the explicit rationale. The Hungary factory addresses that problem over time, but factories take years to ramp production, and the tariff pressure is right now. Brazil raised its own import barriers in response to the Chinese export surge in early 2026. BYD's overseas shipments more than doubled in a single month, triggering exactly the defensive tariff responses that a flood of competitively priced foreign vehicles predictably generates in any receiving market. Every country watching cheap Chinese cars arrive in volume responded by building a wall, and BYD's entire international growth strategy depends on getting inside those markets before the walls go up. The Mexico factory introduces a different calculation. BYD has been constructing assembly capacity in Mexico that could, under current trade rules, allow vehicles to enter the U.S. through USMCA regional provisions. The current administration has signaled clearly that the regulatory environment will not treat a tariff run at the southern border as a simple compliance question. That story is unresolved and represents one of the more consequential trade decisions of the next several years. BYD is now caught between two realities with no clean path through either one. At home, the boom conditions that built the company are permanently gone. Government subsidies are contracting, domestic competition is more intense than at any previous point in the company's history, and the price war compressed margins in ways that are structural rather than cyclical. They are features of a maturing market that has absorbed the initial EV demand wave and is now fighting over share among existing buyers rather than converting new ones. Abroad, every major market of meaningful scale has erected or is actively building a barrier specifically designed to neutralize BYD's cost advantage. The company's manufacturing efficiency makes it dangerous in any open market. Those open markets are closing. This is not a problem that resolves when conditions improve, the conditions that made BYD's growth possible. A market new to EVs, massive government subsidies, limited serious domestic competition at scale, and open access to major international markets are not coming back in the same form. What BYD built was optimized for a specific window of history that has already closed. Go back to the name, build your dreams. It was not ironic when Wang Chuanfu chose it in 1995. He was a chemist with $300,000, a factory reverse engineering Japanese battery cells, and a genuine theory about where the world was heading. For most of 2 decades, that theory was ignored by everyone in a position to take it seriously. Then for about 4 years, it looked like the most prescient industrial bet of the modern era. BYD really did beat Tesla. It really did become the best-selling brand in China. The Blade battery really is a genuine engineering achievement. God's eye at standard equipment with zero upcharge really did make every competitor look behind the curve. But here is what this entire story keeps arriving at from every direction. BYD did not build its empire on patience or precision. It built it on speed, state support, and a price war strategy that worked right up until it consumed the industry it was supposed to dominate. The company scaled faster than its quality control could reliably manage, faster than its dealer network could absorb, faster than global demand outside China actually existed in the form the forecasts assumed, and faster by some independent analyses than its own balance sheet could honestly support. What you are looking at when you put all 5 crises in the same frame at once is this: a 55% profit collapse in a single quarter, over 300,000 recalls in 12 months, dealer networks collapsing and leaving real customers and real employees without recourse, a debt picture that independent researchers place at roughly 10 times the official figure, and a home market share already eroding, while the rest of the world builds higher tariff walls, with BYD specifically in mind. BYD is not disappearing. It is still the largest EV manufacturer on Earth. It still has technology that no Western automaker can match on cost. The Blade battery is real. The engineering culture that produced a luxury SUV, documented floating on water, is real. But the era where BYD looked unstoppable, where every quarter was a new record, and the only question was how quickly the company would own the global EV market, that era ended in 2025. What replaced it is a company managing simultaneous fires in a market that has changed structurally around it, with a business model built for conditions that no longer exist. Build your dreams. The dream was real. The bill arrived in 2025, and it arrived with interest. If this gave you something worth thinking about, drop a comment below. I want to know whether you see this as a stumble BYD recovers from, or the beginning of something structurally larger unraveling across the whole Chinese EV industry. That debate is worth having. If you are new here, this channel covers the real stories behind the cars, the companies, and the decisions that shape what ends up in your driveway. No brand loyalty, no hype cycle, just the story wherever it leads. Subscribe and turn on notifications because this one is still developing.